first, let's set the motif for the Torah portion. And we're going to go back about 2,000 years to a scene. Now, I want to encourage you with a life-changing idea. Make sure that the story that you tell is one that speaks to your highest aspirations. And we should tell it regularly, should we not? Okay? So our setting is Jerusalem about 2,000 years ago or so. The occasion is the bringing of the first fruits of the temple, and it's described in the Mishnah, the event. Throughout Israel, villagers would gather in the nearest of 24 regional centers. There overnight, they would sleep in the open air. The next morning, the leader would summon the people with words from the book of Jeremiah 31:5. Arise and let us go up to Zion, to the house of the Lord our God. Now those who lived near Jerusalem would bring fresh figs and grapes, and those who lived far away would bring dried figs and raisins. An ox would walk ahead of them, its horns plated with gold and its head decorated with an olive wreath. Someone would play a flute, and when they came close to Jerusalem, they would send a messenger ahead to announce their arrival. And they start to adorn their first fruits. Governors and officials of the city would come to greet them, and the artisans would stop their work and call out, "Our brothers from such and such a place, come in peace," they would say. The flute would continue playing until the procession reached the Temple Mount. There they would each place their basket of fruit on their shoulder. The Mishnah says that even King Agrippa would do so and carry it to the temple forecourt. There the Levites would sing Psalms 30, verse 2. I will praise you, O God, for you have raised me up and not let my enemies rejoice over me. The scene as groups converged on the temple from all parts of Israel must have been vivid and unforgettable. However, the most important part of the ceremony lied in what happened next. With the basket still on their shoulders, the rivals would say, I declare today to the Lord your God that I have come to the land that the Lord swore to our ancestors to give us. Each would then hold their basket by the rim. The Kohen would place his hand upon it and ceremoniously wave it, and bring of the first fruits would say the following passage, whose text is set out in our parsha, right in the very beginning of it. Now, this scene is very important. It's the story that we tell. Okay? The Jewish people were the first to see God in history. They were also the first to see history itself as extended narrative with an overarching theme. That vision was sustained for the whole of the biblical era. As the event of 1,000 years were interpreted by the prophets and recorded by the historians. The theme of biblical history is about redemption. It begins with suffering. It has an extended middle section about the interactivity drama between God and his people. And it ends with a homecoming and great blessing. The narrative is to be internalized. This is a great problem within the church today. You see, how can you tell a story if you don't internalize it? Like Passover. Okay? This is the transition from history to memory. And this is what the first fruits declaration was about. Those who stood in the temple saying these words were declaring, "This is my story. In bringing these fruits from this land, I and my family are part of it." Most importantly, the story was the basis of identity. Indeed, that is the difference between history and memory. History is an answer to the question, what happened? Memory is an answer to the question, who am I? In Alzheimer's disease, when you lose your memory, what happens? You lose your identity. The same is true of the nation as a whole. So when we tell the story of our people, we renew our identity. We have a context in which we can understand who we are in the present and what we must do to hand on our identity to future generations if God tarries. Now, sometimes it may be very difficult to grasp the significance of this. In the Western civilization of our modern people, it has been marked by two different attempts to escape identity. First, in the 18th century, there was the European Enlightenment. Now, this focused on two universalism and science and philosophy. Science aims at discovering laws that are universally true. Philosophy aims at disclosing universal structures of thought. Now, identity is about groups. It's about us. Now, groups can conflict. Look at the church. Okay? Therefore, enlightenment sought a world without identity. Now, we are all just human beings, are we not? Yeah. On some level, I have a doubt. Okay? But we'll leave it at that. Okay? Now, remember, no society, no group of people cannot live without identities. Identity is never universal. But identity makes us a very unique person. Okay? This was the Enlightenment's blind spot. Identity came roaring back in the 19th century based on one of three factors: nation, race, or class. Now, in the 19th century, nationalism led to 2 world wars. Racism led to the Holocaust. Marxist class warfare led essentially by Stalin, the Gulag, the KGB since the 60s. The West has been embarked on a second attempt to escape from identity. Now, in favor not of the universal, but of the individual. In the belief that identity is something each of us freely creates for him or herself. But identity is never created this way. It is always about membership in a group. Now, just as happened after the Enlightenment period, identity has come roaring back to the West. This time in the form of identity politics based on gender, ethnic groups, or sexual orientation. This, if allowed to flourish, led to yet more historical disasters. It is a major threat to the future of liberal democracy. Now, coming back to first fruits was of an immense consequence. It meant that they regularly told the story of who they were and why. Now, what made the biblical story unique was the focus on redemption. In partnership with God, we can change the world, can we not? Now, this story is our heritage. And it is our contribution to the moral horizons of humankind. Hence, the life-changing idea, our lives are shaped by the story that we tell. Now, so make sure the story that you tell is one that speaks of your highest aspiration. And as I said earlier, tell it regularly. See, too many are hidden in their churches or in their groups, and they're not telling the story. They're not giving a history to the world. The world is steeped in identity politics. Me, myself, and I. So we need to have a sense of history. Now, first fruit ceremony was a magnificent one. In the historical context, however, its most significant aspect was the declaration each individual had to make. Okay? And they would declare, my father was a wandering Armenian, and he went down into Egypt with a few people and lived there and became a great nation, powerful and numerous. Then the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand, outstretched arm, with great terror, and with miraculous signs and wonders. Deuteronomy chapter 26, verses 5 through 10. Now the ancients, as we know, saw the gods in nature. Never more so than in thinking about the harvest and all that accompanied it. Nature does not change, does it? Natural time is cylindrical, the seasons of the year, the revolution of the planets, the cycle of birth and death and new life. Now, when the ancients thought about the past, okay, it was not historical, but it was mystical, metaphysical, cosmological, the past. The primal time before time, when the world was formed out of the struggle between the elements. Now, this is precisely what did not happen in ancient Israel. It might have been otherwise had Judaism been a different kind of religion. The people bringing first fruits might have recited a song of praise to God as the author of creation, sustainer of life, and we find several such songs in the book of Psalms. Sing to the Lord with thanksgiving, make music to our God on the harp. He covers the sky with clouds. He supplies the earth with rain. He makes grass grow on the hills and bread that sustains his heart. Psalms 147, 7 and 8. Now, the significance of the first fruits declaration is that it is not about nature, but about history. It is a thumbnail sketch of the sequence of events from the days of the patriarchs to the Exodus and then the conquest of the land. Now, it was ancient Israel that first assigned a decisive significance to history and thus forged a brand new worldview. Suddenly, as it were, the encounter between man and the divine shifted away from the realm of nature and the cosmos to the plane of history, conceived now in the terms of divine challenge and human response. Rituals and festivals in ancient Israel were themselves no longer primarily repetitions of mystical archetypes meant to annihilate historical time. Where they invoke the past, it is not the primal, but the historical past, in which the great and critical moments of Israel's history were fulfilled. Only in Israel and nowhere else is the injunction to remember felt as a religious imperative for an entire people. And remember, history was not academic. It was not the province of the scholars or literary elite. It belongs to every one of us. The declaration was recited to everyone. Knowing the story of one's people was an essential part of the citizenship into the community of faith. Not only that, but it also said in the first person, "My Father." Then the Lord brought us out of Egypt. He brought us to this place. It is this internalization of history that led the rabbis to say, in each generation, every person should see himself as if he personally came out of Egypt. And when you do the Passover, do you really realize that? Or when you do the feast and all the things that are connected to it, does it come to the first person, you? Now, history should be transformed into memory. All believers should be conscious of their identity because we are steeped in the book of history. At any rate, the rest of the world instantly recognizes as the believers at historical and conscious sense of continuity with the past. Now, remember, it is the most powerful thing that we have. Our identity, who we are. The story that we tell. Too many people lack the story. Now, they may have a story about Yeshua, about salvation, about the crucifixion, resurrection. But do they have the story from the beginning? Can they tell the story from the Garden of Eden all the way through the history of Israel, how it came to its climax with the Messiah, and how it will come to its ultimate end in a new heavens and a new earth? You see, to be a believer is to be linked in a chain of generations, a character in a drama that began long ago, before you were born, and will continue long after our deaths. So your memory and what you pass on to your generations is essential to your identity. So Judaism insists we did not come from nowhere, nor does our story end with us. We are leaves in an ancient tree, chapters in a long and still being written story, a letter in the scroll of the book. We are, and always will be, the people of the book. Now, for people to learn to grow, to rise beyond our often dysfunctional and destructive instincts, to reach moral and spiritual maturity, and create a society of dignity and generosity. That is why the covenant is extended over time, and why the only adequate guarantors of the covenant at Mount Sinai is us today and the children that are yet to be born. At this point, this is as close as we can get to immortality on this earth. Okay? To know that we are the guardians of the hopes of our ancestors and the trustees of the covenant for the sake of the future. So instead of celebrating nature, celebrate the history of your people from the days when my father was a wandering Armenian into the present. As Moses said in most of his last words to his posterity, remember the days of old. Consider the generations past. Ask your father, and he will tell you. Your elders, and they will explain to you. Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 7. So, to be a believer is to know the history of your people. And that history needs to live on in us. Now, where does all of this leave us or lead us to? But to what Brenda brought up earlier, the pursuit of joy. Now, our society is on a crash course to what is going to happen to a national identity when everything holding the nation together disintegrates or disappears. What happens to a society when the focus of a culture is on self and its icon is the selfie? What happens when Google filters, Facebook friends divide us into non-communicating sects of like-minded? And what happens to morality when the mantra is no longer, we're all in this together, but rather, I'm free to be myself? Now, too many people look after the term happiness. Everybody want to be happy?
Yes.
Well, are you sure? Okay. Where does happiness come from? Well, Aristotle said that it was the ultimate goal at which all humans aim. But, as I'll teach you now, in Judaism it is not necessarily so. Happiness is a high value, I'll give that. Okay? Asheri, the closest Hebrew word to happiness, is the first word of the book of Psalms. We say the prayer known as the Asheri 3 times each day. We can surely endorse the phrase in the American Declaration of Independence that among the inalienable rights of humankind is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But Asherah is not the central value of the Hebrew Bible. In other words, happiness. Occurring almost 10 times as frequent is the word simcha. Joy. It is one of the fundamental themes of the book of Deuteronomy. The root Simcha appears only once in each of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, but no less than 12 times in Deuteronomy. Now it lies at the heart of the Mosaic vision of life. That should be where we serve God, is with joy.
Yes. Amen.
Now, joy plays a key role in context in this week's Parsha. We talked about it previously in the other Parshas. Okay? One has to do with bringing first fruits to the temple. After describing the ceremony that took place, the Torah concludes, "Then you will rejoice in all the good things that the Lord your God has given you and your family, along with the Levites and the stranger in your midst." Chapter 26, verse 11. The other context is quite different. It occurs in the context of curses. Two passages, Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28. Now the difference is very notable. The curses in Leviticus end with a note of hope. Okay? The Deuteronomy ends with the bleak despair. Now, the Levitic curses speak of total abandonment of Judaism by the people. The people walk Bikorai with God, variously translated with hostility, rebelliously, or contemptuously. But the curses in Deuteronomy are provoked simply because you did not serve the Lord your God with joy and gladness of heart out of the abundance of all things. 28:47. Now, joylessness may not be the best way to live, okay? But it is surely not even a sin, let alone one that warrants a litany of curses. So what does the Torah mean when it attributes national disaster to a lack of joy? What does joy seem to matter in Judaism more than happiness? Well, to answer these questions, we have to first understand the difference between happiness and joy. Now, the first psalm describes a happy life. You can read it at your leisure. Okay? It goes like this. Happy is the man who has not walked in the counsel of the wicked, nor stood in the way of sinners, or sat where scoffers sit. But his desire is in the Torah of the Lord. On his Torah he meditates day and night, and he shall be like a tree planted by the springs of water, bearing its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither, and in all of that he does prosper. Psalms 1:1-3. Now, this would be a very serene and blessed life, granted one who lives in accordance with the Torah. Like a tree, such a life has roots. It is not blown this way and that way by every passing wind or whim. Such people begin to bear fruit. They stay firm. They'll survive. They'll thrive. Yet for all of that, happiness is a state of mind of an individual. Amen. Now, Simcha in the Torah is never about individuals. It is always about something we share. A newly married man does not serve in the army for a year, says the Torah, so that he can stay at home and bring joy to the wife he has married. Deuteronomy 24:5. You shall bring all of your offerings to the central sanctuary, says Moshe, so that there, in the presence of the Lord your God, you and your family shall eat and rejoice in all that you have put your hand to. because the Lord your God has blessed you. Deuteronomy 12:7. Now the festivals, and we're coming up on them, okay, described in Deuteronomy are days of joy, precisely because they are occasions of collective celebration. You, your sons, your daughters, your male, your female servants, the Levites in your towns, the stranger, the fatherless, the widows living among you. Simcha is joy shared. It is not something that we experience in solitude like happiness. Happiness is an attitude to life as a whole, while joy lives in the moment. Happiness is solid. Now joy is liquid. Happiness is something you pursue, but joy is not. It discovers you. It has to do with a sense of connection to other people or to God. It comes from a different realm than happiness. It is what I would call a social emotion. It is the exhilaration that we feel when we merge with others. It is the redemption of solitude. Now, a biblical book most focuses on joy is precisely the one often thought of as unhappiest of all books. Anybody know that one? The unhappiest book in the Bible.
Ecclesiastes.
Huh?
Ecclesiastes.
You're right. Kohelet. Ecclesiastes. Now Kohelet is notoriously the man who had everything. He describes it all as Hivel. Okay? A word that is used almost 40 times in the space of the book and variously translated as meaningless, pointless, futile, empty, or as the King James famously rendered it, vanity of vanities, all is vain. In fact, though, Kohelet uses the word simcha 17 times. That is more than the whole of the Mosaic books. After every one of his meditations on the pointlessness of life, and who was this? Who wrote Ecclesiastes? Solomon. He tried it all. He did everything. He found out it did not make him happy. You can have the whole world, and you're not going to be happy having it. Okay? We see this. If you read Ecclesiastes, you will understand how Solomon, he had everything. 1,000 wives, horses, palaces. He had it all. Money, you name it. Power. But at the end of his life, he found out it was all vanity of vanities. Kohelet ends with an exhortation to joy. I know that there is nothing better for people than to rejoice and do good while they live. Chapter 3, verse 12. So I saw that there is nothing better for a person than to rejoice in his work, because that is his lot. Chapter 3, verse 22. So I commend rejoicing in life, because there is nothing better for a person under the sun to eat and to drink and to rejoice. Chapter 8, verse 15. However many years anyone may live, let him rejoice in them all. Chapter 11, verse 8. Now, I have an argument with Kohelet. Now, it's that it can only be understood if we realize that Hivel does not mean pointless, empty, or futile. It means a shallow breath. Kohelat is a meditation on mortality. Have you ever considered your life like a vapor, like the grass that grows up? Now our lives are in the cosmos of history, in the universe, is just a microsecond. The cosmos lasts forever, while we, living, breathing mortals, are just a mere fleeting breath, are we not? So, with these in mind, should we not take joy? Every time I see my granddaughter, and you've seen her okay, just a little bit, she goes, Grammy, Papa. She rejoices with joy. Okay? May she have that all the days of her life, because life is a struggle and it can take those things away from you. Now Moses did not lead the people into the promised land. His sons did not follow him to greatness. Even he, the greatest of the prophets, could not foresee that he would be remembered for all time as the greatest leader of the Jewish people until Yeshua came. And Yeshua will fulfill that and become God in the midst of them. Now, we do not know what our heirs will do. You know, when Cain killed Abel, God said that his blood cried out from the ground. Well, really what cried out was all the generations that he would have spawned. Can you imagine what God hears with the abortions in America? The great men that are past, the generations that cry out because they never will be. See, we need to understand that if we impart joy, simcha, we enjoy the Word of God into their lives, that they will be great in the kingdom of God. Amen. Now, we cannot know how or if we will be remembered. How then are we to find meaning in our lives? Kohelet eventually finds it not in happiness. But when you read Ecclesiastes, you will come to the conclusion that it is in joy. Because joy lives not in the thoughts of tomorrow, but in the grateful aspects, acceptance, and celebration of today. We are here, we are alive, we are among others, and we share our sense of jubilation. We are living in God's land, enjoying His blessings, eating the produce of the earth, Amen. Watered by His rain, brought to fruition under His sun, breathing the air that God has given us, living the life He renews in us each day. And yes, we do not know what tomorrow will bring. And yes, we are surrounded by enemies. And yes, it was never safe or easy option to be a Jew or a believer. But when we focus on the moment, allowing ourselves to dance and to sing and to give thanks, when we do things for their own sake, not for any other reward, when we let go of our separateness and become a voice, then there is joy. Now it takes moral courage to give. It takes religious courage to rejoice. Hence, Moses insisted that the capacity for joy is what gives the believer the strength to endure. Celebrating together binds us as a people, why God instituted the Shema. So, I encourage you, like Solomon came to understand, the pursuit of happiness can lead ultimately to self-regard, indifference to the suffering of others. It can lead to risk adverse behavior and a failure to dire greatly. But not so with joy. Joy connects us to others. And most important, it connects us to God. Amen. Joy is the ability to celebrate life and the life that God has given us abundantly. And we, under God's heaven and in the universe He made, to which He has invited us as His guests. A people that can know insecurity and still feel joy is one that can never be defeated. For its spirit can never be broken, nor its hope ever destroyed. So, I come to the ultimate statement in all of this. You are to listen and understand the law. Now, it would be reasonable to assume that the language that contains the verb to command must also contain the verb to obey. The one implies the other, just as the concept of a question implies the possibility of an answer. We would, however, be wrong. There are 613 commandments in the Torah, but there is no word in the biblical Hebrew that means to obey. And when Hebrew was revived as a language of everyday speech in the 19th century, many Hebrew words have lost their meaning. Now, let's say yeet had to be borrowed from the Aramaic. Until then, there was no Hebrew for to obey. Now, the Shema, we always declare, means to hear and obey. Now, this is an astonishing fact that not everyone was aware of. It leads some Christians and secularists to misunderstand the nature of Judaism. Very few Christian thinkers fully appreciate the concept of the mitzvah and the idea that God must choose to reveal Himself in the form of laws. It also led some Jews to think about the mitzvah in a way more appropriate to Islam. Now, the word Islam means submitting to God's law, which they do a very poor job of it. And even Judaism does a very poor job of it. So, what does the Torah use as an appropriate response to a mitzvah? Shema. The root Shema is a key word in the book of Deuteronomy, where it occurs 92 times. Usually in the sense of what God wants from us in response to the commandments. But the verb Shema means many things. Here are some of the meanings that it has in Genesis. To hear, as in Abram had heard that his relative Lot had been taken captive, chapter 14:14. to listen, pay attention, heed, as in because you listened to your wife and ate fruit from the tree. Chapter 3, verse 17. And then Rachel said, God has vindicated me, has listened to my plea and given me a son. Chapter 30, verse 7. Now to understand is in, come, let us go down and confuse their language so that they will not understand each other. Chapter 11, verse 7. This is how tradition understood the latter phrase, na-si. Vi nishma, Exodus 24:7. It means first we will do, then understand. Now, to be willing to obey, as the angel's words to Abraham after the binding of Isaac. Through your offspring, all nations of the earth will be blessed, because you were willing to obey me. Chapter 22, verse 18. Abraham, was about to obey God's command, but at the last moment, an angel said, stop. Now, to respond indeed, to do what someone else wants, as in do whatever Sarah tells you. Now it is in this last sense that comes closest in the meaning to obey. Now, the fact that Shema means all these things suggests that in the Torah there is no concept of blind obedience. In general, a commander orders and a soldier obeys. A slave owner orders and the slave obeys. There is no active thought process involved. The connection between the word of the commander and the deed of the commanded is one of action and reaction, stimulus and response. For the practical purpose of all of this, the soldier or the slave has no mind of his own. As it is described, the attitude of the soldier before the charge of the light brigade. Ours is not to reason why, ours is but to do or die. Okay? So, I don't know if I'd really want to follow that line of thought. Because the Torah is not this way. It gives us and conceives the relationship between God and us. God who created us in His image, giving us the freedom and the power to think, wants us to understand His commands. It is this that makes the Torah different. The Torah is unique among all the other doctrines and religions that other nations have or had. And our Torah contains nothing that does not originate in equity and reason. Therefore, the divine law attracts people. It does it in virtue of its essence, so that they behave in accordance with it. The laws and the religions of other nations are not like this. They do not conform to equity and wisdom, but are foreign to the nature of man. And people obey them because of compulsion, out of fear of the threat of punishment, but not because of their essence. Okay? Take the traffic lights, especially in Pure. They got them everywhere. Cameras. Okay? What is it? It's a threat of a ticket. And their tickets are not cheap. I think They're like $150 a hit or more. Okay? Now, people are so much into self, okay, they have lost the essence of morality and the essence of why we do things. Okay? I see them all the time go down the road where the sign says 60. They're going, phew, phew, phew. And Brenda's going, Jiminy. I said, well, they're doing what naturally comes to them. They are the no-law man. And they desire in their hearts to break law, not learn the essence of why. So God wants us to understand why He gave the law and the essence of it. We get a little picture of it in Shema. Hear and obey. Now, the Torah uses at least 3 devices to show that the Torah is not arbitrary or just a mere decree. First, especially evident throughout the book of Davidic is the giving of reason for the commandments. Often, though, not always, the reason has to do with the experience of the Israelites in Egypt. They knew what it felt like to be oppressed, to be a stranger, an outsider. Now, God wanted them to create a different kind of society. God did this and said it through Moshe, where slavery is more limited, where everyone is free 1 day a week, where the poor do not go hungry, and the powerless are not denied justice. The second reason, most notable, is in the book of Bamidbar. It is the narrative, on the law, as if to say the law is best understood against the backdrop of the red heifer. Backdrop of history and of experience. In their formative years, so the law of the red heifer, purification from contact with the dead, occurs just before the death of Miriam and Aaron, as if it was to say bereavement and grief interfere with our contact with God. But this does not last forever. We cannot become pure again. The law, the Torah, the tzitzit, occurs after the story of the spies, because in the earlier covenant, both have to do with ways of seeing the difference between seeing with fear and seeing with faith. The third reason is the connection between the Torah and metaphysics. There is a strong connection between Genesis chapter 1, the story of creation, and the laws of Kiddushah, holiness. Both belong to Torah Kohanim, a priestly voice. Both are about order and the maintenance of boundaries. Now, throughout the book of Davidic, Moshe reaches the summit of his leadership, explaining to the new generation who will eventually conquer and inhabit the land, that the Torah that God has given them are not just divine decrees. They make sense in the human terms. They constitute the architecture of a tree and a just society, of a free and just society. Respect human dignity, honor the integrity of nature. You see, only on recognizing God as our sovereign will they guard against overbearing kings and corruption of power. Time and again, Moshe tells the people that if they follow God's Torah or his laws, you will prosper. If they fail to do so, they will suffer defeat and exile. Now, this is why Moshe constantly throughout Deuteronomy uses the verb Shema. He wants the Israelites to obey. And who is they to obey? God. But not blindly or through fear alone. God is not an autocrat. The Israelites should know this through their own direct experience. They have seen how God, creator of heaven and earth, had chosen this people as his own, brought them from slavery to freedom, fed them, sustained them, protected them through the wilderness, led them to victory against their enemy. God had not given the Torah to Israel for his sake, but it was given to Israel and to us for our sake. So we find that we now have been given an invite to be a receiver of the Torah, to join in gasping and benevolence effect of the law, thereby bestowing dignity upon him and giving him a sense that you can be a partner in the Torah. This is the meaning of Moshe's great words in this week's Parsha. Be silent, O Israel, and listen. You have not become the people of the Lord your God. Listen to the Lord your God and follow. And what do we follow? We follow his commandments, his decrees that are given to you this day. Deuteronomy 27, verse 9 and 10. Now, keeping the commandments involves the act of listening, does it not? Okay? Not just submission and blind obedience. Listening in all of its multiple senses of attending, meditating, and reflecting of the nature of God through his creation. Now, through all of this, you will find revelation, and you will come to the climax of redemption. That means trying to understand our limits, our imperfections, as we are humans. It means remembering that it felt like to be a slave in Egypt. It involves humility and memory, and also gratitude. But it does not involve abdicating of the intellect or silencing of questioning minds. God is not a tyrant, but he is our teacher. He seeks not just our obedience, but he wants our understanding. Now we know that all nations have laws, and laws are there to be obeyed. But there are few nations other than Israel set it as their highest task to understand why the law is as it is. This is what the Torah means by the word Shema. And this is our Torah portion. Yeah, Ladonna. Speak up loudly.
Okay.
Nobody can hear you unless you.
Okay. We'll make this brief and concise. With Yeshua in mind and the nation to which to which he was speaking and establishing, Moshe was speaking for the Lord, the wooing and the consummation of his relationship with a bride, not slaves, not soldiers, but he was establishing a family. Is that correct?
He was establishing a people, a family, a collective,
Okay.
a free people.
So that's why he is giving orders with the desire of understanding, because he is bringing these people up and into his identity, not you're this over here. He's addressing them and embracing them. And like by the time Yeshua comes, what has happened is the bride has rejected the Father, and Yeshua is now saying to the individual, will you follow me? He addresses us as his sons, right? He's still taking us in. So he's not just saying, you do this, and not giving explanation. He's bringing us up and into his identity again. Is that correct?
Well, the scripture, to a large degree, the scriptures declare that we are children of the Most High God.
Yes.
So what he has done is he has adopted as his very own children for eternity's sake. Okay. Besides that, it all starts in the garden. It ends back in the garden. Okay. Everything in between is to create a people that have a father. Okay. Now, when we look at the family, which the world wants to destroy, okay, it loses all concept of reality. God gives us in the Bible everything you need to be connected, not only as a family, as a nation, as a people, but as children with a father. Okay? Now, when we begin to understand that we are not little vessels controlled by fear, okay, but we are understood, you cannot live in the natural elements of creation without morality, justice, but most importantly, okay, without understanding that there are laws to obey and there are things that have consequences if you get out of order with what has been set in order. Because without that, you have nothing more than chaos and rebellion. So as a people of God, there is no better book to live by than the Bible. It explains everything. It explains God. It connects you to God. Him and His Word and Him are one. Okay? So if you want to know God, know His Word. Okay? And to know His Word is like a father in a family that says, these are the rules. Okay? I brought you into the world so that I can give you order to your life. Happiness. Joy. See, joy is the essence of a family unit that is collectively. Okay? I often looked for happiness in things and never found it. Nothing made you happy. People do Christmas and they get all of this stuff, okay? And then they turn around and they're unhappy. Why? I didn't get what I wanted. Well, you're lucky you got anything at all. Okay? See, but collectively, joy, okay, in relationship to others is really what should bind not only a family but a community together. And the joy that we express, you can see in a little baby like Emma. Emma! Hi. Love me? You see, there's something in a child that we have lost as adults. It is joy. Oh, life has its problems. Okay? I don't set my life in order with things.
Right.
Okay? I set my life in order with God. Now, God loves to teach lessons. Okay? One day, I had a nice house, nice job. Okay? I was a regional manager for Canon copiers. And I had a nice house in Gig Harbor overlooking the bay. Okay? And God said to me one day, can you walk away from all this? I said, well, Lord, if you want me to. What do you think happened? I had to walk away from it. Okay? The job went belly up. Hey, the owner of the company was caught embezzling. And the IRS shut him down. Okay? So I ended up without a job. Okay? But I wasn't going to find a regional manager's job like the one I had. So me and Brenda had to walk away from a beautiful home. Overlooking Mount Rainier, Gig Harbor, the deer coming out and eating the roses. Beautiful place. But it's a thing. And if God wants something for you that's better, He'll give it to you. So then, we ended up renting after that. Okay? And so we rented in Gig Harbor in 2 different homes. Then I made a statement to God. Somebody said something about living in a trailer, and I said, I'll never live in a trailer. Never say never to God. 900 square foot trailer, 3 children, a wife, a husband, and a grandmother. Okay? So I ended up in a trailer in Puyallup. From nice looking Gig Harbor to Puyallup. Well, the time came that we needed more than what we had. So what did God do? We started looking for something better. And what did God do? Gave us the house we live in now. He gave it to us. The people that, we went to the door and we pushed the doorbell and it did Hava Nagila.
Oh my goodness.
Brenda goes, this is it. And we went in and started working with the people. And we found that he had cash offers. Okay?
Wow.
But we knew God was on the move. And so we talked to him, and we were only, had the job I had at the time, only allowed me to buy the house. The house was like $185,000 total. And we could only afford $165,000 at the time. And so we negotiated with him, And he said, well, I've got cash offers. And I said, well, what are you going to do? He says, well, we believe that God meant for you to be in the home. It'll take a second.
Oh, my God.
And so they took a second on the house, and we moved in. And back to a beautiful home, back like the one we had in New York. So God teaches, diminishes things in our own sight, and then restores things as we learn God's lessons. So never declare, I will not do this or that. Because then God will say, okay, lesson time. And you won't like the outcome.
Amen.
Be humble,
Amen.
as the Torah teaching tells you.
Amen.
And be the people of God.
Amen.
And remember the word Shema. It is more than just to hear and obey. It is understanding and having a picture and relationship with the Almighty God. Because He and His Word is one. Amen?
Amen.
There's your Torah portion. All right. I do want to do one thing before we close. Where is Justin? Get him. Somebody get him. And Robert, when you, Robert, you come up here. Now, bring you and your companion up here. Up here. Come. Now, please, in regards to the learning dog, please, as a service dog, do not bother the dog he's in training, please. Okay? He needs to come and learn to obey. And you will not help him obey if you run up to him and try to pet him. Okay? Now, to climax the Torah portion, both of these gentlemen have a story to tell.
Okay, absolutely. He says,
Well, you know the story you're supposed to tell. What did God do for you? Well, why don't you talk to people about what we talked about? Huh? About what God did about your heart.
well, I mean, he revealed that I had some heart issues, probably had them for a really long time. No one knew, none of the doctors caught it. Occasionally someone would be like, I thought I heard something, no. And they'd let it drop. And I was working on someone's house and got shocked with a bunch of electricity. And this gal that was there said, hey, you need to go and get your heart checked. I was like, nah. And then my alarm went off, and it was a reminder that I needed to go see my general practitioner. She goes, look, God is telling you right now to go. Just go. All right, I'll go. She's like, all right, and ask. Well, they tested it, and there was issues wrong. And first they thought that I had clogged arteries. They did the little test there, and bunch of prayer. They go in my wrist, nothing. Completely clean. Doctor's amazed. He says, I don't know. It's completely clean. And so we still have to fix, I have a premature ventricular contractions. One part of my heart would squeeze when it shouldn't. It would be in rhythm, and then it would just do its own thing too.
Wow.
And so they had to go in and deal with that. And it was a smashing success. I mean, just incredible. he says, you know, it's perfect now. There's no arrhythmia at all. And things are just, he said it was better than his own heart, really.
And why? Because we prayed.
Yeah. Faith.
Okay? And we did also the same thing for Justin. We prayed. Now,
So I went over to Rabbi's house, and him and Miss Brenda laid hands on me, and they anointed me with the oil. And so as you know, I had been diagnosed with lymphoma. There was actually a small tumor at the top of my brain cell, on top of my brain up here. And within a couple of weeks of us praying for that, we went into the doctor, and they did another CAT scan of the brain, and the doctor said, it's gone. The doctor said he's been practicing medicine for close to 4 years, and he's never seen anything like it. And I told him, I said, well, you don't know the God that I know, sir. I report that, you know, I had roughly about 4 tumors, and down to 2. Before any chemo or radiation had even began to be a part of my life at the time. So, yeah.
Amen.
and so this is the story they tell
Amen.
of God and His ability to reach into their lives and touch them and change them.
Amen.
So tell it regularly. Exalt the Most High God.
Amen.
See, that's why we have stories. They only have history. So this is the story, and some of you are in the midst of your battle, but in the end, if you persevere, you'll have a story to tell as well.
And Rabbi, you know, this is that simcha. This is the joy, right, that we experience collectively. We sang about it, right, in praise and worship today.
Because we rejoice with you.
May the Lord answer you when you're in distress, but we rejoice with you collectively. Amen?
Amen.
We rejoice with you.
I can tell you when I was missing church and not coming on a regular basis and not communicating with the congregation or rabbis, it didn't solve my problem. In fact, it only got worse. And then within a few weeks of me returning, I'm really just blessed. And that's the power of the Lord, and that's the Lord that I know and I boast of.
So just remember this. In a battle, God will prove us to see if we're faithful.
Amen.
Okay? So, the proof will be in the pudding, whether it molds or whether it is fresh
Amen.
and life-giving. Hang in there, because there are stories yet to be told. Amen.
Amen.
All right, let's close the Torah.